Well, hello, everyone. I'm going to start our Gramercy Book Club discussion. Tonight, we're featuring We Are the Brennans by author Tracey Lange. I want to thank you all for joining us. And I also want to thank the Ohio State University Department of English for being Gramercy's community partner for this book club program. I'm Linda Kass, and we're live streaming this program through Zoom meeting, and it will be recorded. To preview the next hour for you, after introductions, our moderator, Jim Phelan, will lead you in a discussion about We Are the Brennans for about 30 minutes. We'll be joined by Tracey Lange for the following half hour. Jim will ask Tracey your questions as well as several of his own during that latter time. And let me review a few details about the Zoom meeting platform, although I know we're all very well versed in Zoom. First, on the upper right corner of your screen, you've got those two viewing options, speaker view or gallery view. And next, you find the mute, unmute icon, which appears as a microphone on your screen. Right now, Nikki has you all muted, but once I introduce our facilitator and discussion begins, you'll be able to unmute yourself when you have a comment, and then just be sure to mute yourself when you're finished speaking. And you will all be muted during the question and answer portion of the program. The chat box is another handy tool, and the icon sits on the bottom or the top of your screen. Clicking on it opens the window on the right side of your screen and allows you to write comments. If you have a question that you'd like Jim to ask Tracey during the second half of the program, please insert that at any time during the program and do so in capital letters so he can really see it during that question portion. And if you'd prefer to comment on chat instead of camera during the book discussion, you can do so, but I hope that you don't. I hope you all just, unmute yourself and join in, because this is a great book to have a discussion about. The chat box text will also be recorded. If you haven't done so yet, click on chat right now. We're providing registration links to our next 4 author programs. They're all at 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. We are offering both small in-person programs with safety protocols alongside those online. And of the 4 I'm going to share with you, there are 2 of each. So we ask only those vaccinated to attend our indoor events. And as many of you, I'm sure, know, that masks are now required by the city of Bexley for all indoor gatherings. So the first event I'm going to mention is on Wednesday, September 22nd, John Thorndike, author of The Last of His Mind, A Year in the Shadow of Alzheimer's, shares the bittersweet account of his final year with his father, Joe, who's the former managing editor of Life magazine. John's memoir is a portrait of deep family ties, caregiving, and love, and this is a free event, and it will be held in the bookstore with limited seating. And then on Tuesday, September 28th, we will have a live stream through Zoom webinar program with National Jewish Book Award winner Ronald Balson. It's his latest legal thriller called Defending Britta Stein, a story of bravery, betrayal, and redemption, reaching back into Nazi-occupied Denmark. Balson will be in conversation with Ohio State University's David Stebbin, an expert in American political and legal history. Then on Monday, October 4th, we have another in-store event. It's free. Farm-to-table pioneer Peter Hoffman will be in Columbus and in conversation with local food system expert Amy Boddicker-Basks about his new book, What's Good? A Memoir in 14 Ingredients. During this intimate evening, you'll learn about the outer life of a restaurant. Peter was the owner and chef of the famed Savoy in Soho that closed about 10 years ago. And you'll also learn about the inner life of an extraordinary chef. And finally, on Tuesday, October 12th, Pulitzer Prize winner Anthony Doerr, author of All the Light We Cannot See, will be in conversation with #1 New York Times bestselling author Jess Walter. And Anthony is going to celebrate the publication of his extraordinary new novel called Cloud Cuckoo Land. It is as remarkable, perhaps even more so, of his beloved earlier book that I mentioned. And as I said, this will be live streamed through Zoom webinar. You can click on the link for any of these programs to learn more about them or to register. And you can learn about all of Gramercy's author programs by going to our website, gramercybooksbexley.com. And you can also sign up for our e-newsletter there, where you could then get regular information. Now on to tonight's program. In our book club selection, We Are the Brennans, debut author Tracey Lange explores the staying power of shame and the redemptive power of love in an Irish Catholic family torn apart by secrets. This is, after all, a book about secrets. Most obvious are the secrets of the Brennans themselves, dating all the way back to the Westchester County-based family's roots in Northern Ireland. Others are newer. What the reader comes to find out is that all the Brennans' trouble in the present is caused by buried secrets in the past. At any point in the family's recent history, the telling of these secrets could have prevented tragedy. And this is, to a great extent, a central theme of the book. And it's a novel that's been expertly crafted, and I know Jim's going to talk about that. Born in the Bronx and raised in Manhattan, Tracey Lange comes from a large Irish family with a few secrets of its own, she says. She headed west and graduated from the University of New Mexico. While writing her very confident and polished debut novel, she completed the Stanford University online novel writing program. She currently lives in Bend, Oregon, with her husband, 2 sons, and their German Shepherd. Moderating our discussion is Jim Phelan. He's a distinguished university professor of English at The Ohio State University, and he's the director of Project Narrative. He's devoted his research to thinking through the consequences of conceiving of narrative as rhetoric, an effort that has recently taken him to the emerging subfield of narrative medicine. Among his many books are Reading People, Reading Plots, Narrative as Rhetoric, Living to Tell About It, Experiencing Fiction, Reading the American Novel 1920 to 2010, and Somebody Telling Somebody Else. Since 1992, Jim has been the editor of Narrative, the journal of the International Society for the Study of Narrative. And this year, the Society has named Jim the recipient of its Wayne C. Booth Lifetime Achievement Award. Thank you so much for being with us, Jim.
My pleasure, Linda. And so I have ideas, I have lots of things I want to talk about, but we only have a short time. So I would be very interested to hear from you what you'd like to talk about, right? Let me ask first, how many of you were able to finish reading the book? You just raise hands. Okay, and some shaking heads. Okay. So especially for those of you who did finish, maybe put in the chat things that you would like to talk about during this time. And again, as Linda said, feel free to put in the chat things you'd want to ask Tracey about. I'll start, though, by pointing out something I think that's of particular interest in the sort of conception of the book, right? So we have the title, We Are the Brennans. But the strategy of the book is to tell the story of the Brennans by sort of turn-taking, right? So we start with Sunday, and actually the epigraph, it's about, Monday's child is fair of face, etc., right? Sunday's child is full of grace. So she gets featured in a particularly important way, by the way Tracey Lange sets up the book. And then we have Denny and 2 chapters from the father, Mickey, 2 from the other brother, Jackie, several from Cal, who's interestingly not a Brennan, but a Collins, but is, Sunday's former boyfriend, right, who then is, at the present time of the story, is actually married to somebody else, Vivian. Vivian gets 1 chapter. And Jackie, the other brother, gets 2. So, you know, and there's this kind of turn taking going on. So, you know, I mean, that's a kind of technique that's been, you know, if you go back to the epistolary novel in the 18th century, it's sort of turn taking with letter writers. But here there's this difference with turn taking sort of through a third person narrator who then adopts the perspective of, you know, these individual characters. So anyway, I mean, what do you think just in general about that strategy? There's really an interest in, you know, the title signals an interest in giving a portrait of a family. We are the Brennans. But the strategy is about, well, let's take turns, you know, with the individuals. So any thoughts about that, or some of the kind of consequence of that for the way in which it positions you as reader? Were you taken with that?
Yeah, I'll go. This is Marjorie.
Yeah,
What I like, I mean, if anybody is from a bigger family and there's a story to be told, however many people that are in the family, there's that many perspectives of it. And I am, you know, from that big family where someone will say, well, I didn't know it was that way. That didn't happen that way. And they have this other narrative. And oftentimes in this novel, the last thing that was said, then the next person talking, that would be the first line
right.
of the next part.
Right.
And I just like that it was that family where there is all of those different perceptions of either each other or an event,
Right.
even looking back on history. I appreciated that a lot.
Yeah, good. It's good, Marjorie. Thank you. And I like you pointing out the sort of the strategy for bridging chapters, right? So we have a dialogue, some lines of dialogue that come at the end of a chapter, and then one of those lines of dialogue gets repeated, and the character who uttered that line of dialogue then takes over as the dominant perspective. Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing to add to what you're saying is the idea that you get both the sense of, okay, the same thing being perceived differently by the different members of the family, but you also have sort of the revelation of different access to events, right? So you think about Jackie, right, who knows a lot about the sort of precipitating event with Sunday that led her to leave New York and go to California, right? So he knows that, nobody else does, right? And we get you know, some of his perspective on it, and that also colors the differences in you know, constructing a story by, you know, in the family community. Other thoughts on that?
I just want to add that as we get more and more of these perspectives, we end up getting kind of closer to the family itself. They become more of a family, you know, and so I just, you know, the different perspectives, and particularly the repeated perspectives, you know, draw them together. And I love that about this book. And it's very tight third person point of view, right, where really she's very religiously stuck with that, you know, in each perspective. There was just no moving from that, and it made it very intimate when you were with each person.
Yes, right. And I think that's nice. The sort of the cumulative effect of sort of, you have one perspective, then you go to another, then you come back to one you've had before, and it's almost like a kind of snowball with the different perspectives coming into that snowball rolling down the hill. Yeah, Go ahead, somebody else.
That was me. Sorry, Jim. I'm not quite all the way through, but when I got the book this weekend because I was excited to come hear you and meet the author, and I wanted to read as much as I could. And when I bought it, we were talking in the store about the fact that it's a page turner, which is always kind of an interesting thing. What's a page turner for people? And I have found it a page turner, but so far, in terms of the different perspectives, I've found that I'm going back and rereading a chapter because once I've gotten especially just trying to get to know Sunday and getting everybody straight and going back and thinking, I'm not sure I got the whole relationship. And so it kind of made me a more recursive reader than a linear one in some ways. And it may change as it gets closer to the end and figuring out the secrets that I don't all have. But I find that deepening of perspective and looking at the individuals the family comes together, but so do some of the individuals. I think of them differently when I've started reading from these different characters, and it makes me want to go back again, as I said, recursively, which I think is an interesting way to kind of combine almost like a short story technique and a longer narrative at the same time.
Yeah, that's nice, right? I would agree with that. And again, maybe just to add a little something, you know, I read it twice, so I could be prepared for tonight. And the second time, you know, one of the things that occurred to me was how much Tracey Lange can use that perspective to kind of drop hints, right, about things that the character knows that the reader doesn't quite know, right? I mean, so, you know, Mickey can think about, you know, this is going to be a little bit of a spoiler, right? But his infidelity, and that he has a sort of oblique way of referring to it initially, right? So the first time you go through it, you know, you just maybe could read over it, but then, you know, in the kind of recursive reading that you're talking about, Susan, like then it, oh, okay, right? So that's a tricky thing to manage, I think, and it's a testament to Tracey Lange that she, I think, manages it really quite well.
I'd agree with that for sure.
Yeah. So one of the other things that Linda mentioned in her discussion of the book to start us off is that this is a book that's also very concerned with time, right? So we start in the present, right? And there's these various things going on in the present, right? In the trade, we call them instabilities, right? So the instability about Sunday and her accident and what that means. The instability about Denny and his finances and the opening of the second Brennan's pub, right? And the sort of the instability in Cale's relationship with his wife. And, you know, but what we come to see is that each of those things is also tied to the past, right? So I guess one of the things to think about then is how does Tracey Lange sort of encourage her audience to think about these connections, right? What is it about the present that either kind of triggers a need for revisiting the past, or what is it about the past that's informing the way the characters behave in the present, right? Go ahead, Suzanne.
Well, I don't know that I'm going to answer this question the way you might prefer because I'm not a novelist, but I am very Irish Catholic from a big Irish Catholic family. And I just thought she totally captured what it meant to be an oldest child, and Denny to carry this big burden of all this responsibility for the business, to try to solve every problem and to get into all kinds of trouble doing that. all the secrets here and there. I mean, and my husband, even more than I am, has this. For instance, he didn't even meet his father's siblings until his father's funeral because of some of this involvement in the gun running and other nefarious kinds of activities that his father did not want any of his children to know about. So, I mean, what we've got here is really the tip of the iceberg, I would say, in some Irish Catholic families with this deep loyalty, in a sense. Yeah. And so part of the if there's betrayal, there's also loyalty and a sort of protection. Who are you protecting? You want to protect your kids, but you're also at the same time protecting the siblings. And I really so appreciate the way that Tracey Lange managed it in a way that's really liberating, and I don't think really happens in Irish Catholic families. The respect of one sibling for the Jackie for his sister, and saying, well, I sure wasn't going to tell all of this and make her, you know, risk all of the shame with that. I mean, even in the 21st century, it would be a real thing. And, you know, and just also, I mean, that church and priests aren't really part of it, but lo and behold, you know, Mickey is going over to a friend or a relative's home, and I mean, you never know exactly what happened in that conversation, but there's a priest right at this. I don't want to, you know, no spoiler alert here, but I just thought, you know, there's this hint of confession potentially. So I mean, it's pretty amazing, this book, in the way that it's bringing to life and making very real experiences that, you know, I just think have been, you know, completely kind of kept buried. I mean, or, you know, just so I'm not sure that I've at all really answered what your question, but the way she sort of sets all of this up, and you know Denny's going to have a come to Jesus moment, I mean, and that numerous people are going to say to him, oh yeah, so who made you God, you know, to solve all these problems. And then they all help him, and also the meetings around the table that you know, this all is it's so kind of surprised me. I thought, oh, it's not just my family.
So I think, you know, that's one of the things we go to fiction for, right? That sense of you know, capturing something about you know, like this kind of experience, and when that you know, we feel that happens, like we can sort of feel seen, and we can feel, you know, okay, my experience, I can connect my experience with something bigger because this author allows me to do that, and you know, so I think that's one of the pleasures of reading fiction. But I think another question here would be, you know, do you feel like this is particularly peculiar or distinctive to Irish Catholic families, right? So we can say, yes, she's capturing, you know, things about Irish Catholic family. I'm from a big Irish Catholic family, so I have 6 siblings, right? So, you know, so I can connect to a lot of this. But the other question would be, are there other, you know, do you feel like, okay, it's exclusively or distinctively Irish Catholic?
I guess what I would have to say is that it's, I mean, she's writing about a solidly affluent. So we have the sort of lace curtain versus and shanty, you might say, and so you've got the Brennans are very lace curtain, or have they become lace curtains since they arrived in the United States, and mostly due to the hard work and whatever all else the father did. We're not talking about Kennedy kind of wealth at all. But
Right.
I think the inclusion of the tension between the Brennans and I'm forgetting
The
the
Walshes.
yes.
The
Yeah,
Walshes.
that I think that's really well done.
Yeah, no, that's right.
And the
Nice.
class, working class, immigrant families, yes.
Right. Yeah, good. So for those of you who, okay, well, it looks like Tracy's in the waiting room. So first of all, thanks to Melanie for that question. And I'll be sure to pose it to Tracy. If others of you have questions, I'll keep the chat open and be glad to, pass them on to Tracy. So Nikki, you can let Tracy in. Hi, Tracy. Welcome.
Hi.
We've been having a very enthusiastic and appreciative discussion of your very engaging novel, and we're really delighted that you've been able to take some time and be with us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This is great.
Hi, Tracy.
Hi.
I also want to say hi. I'm Linda Kass from Gramercy Books. And, we're just, Jim has been an incredible facilitator. I don't know if you're aware, he's distinguished professor of English at Ohio State and leads their project narrative. And, you've obviously evoked a very complex portrait of a family, and Jim's had us talking all about that. So we just the store wanted to welcome you and let you and Jim continue on your conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish I could have heard I wish I could have been a fly on the wall.
Well, we have at least one question from the group, which I'll get to, and encourage others to keep sending them along. But maybe we start with, I hope, a little bit of a variation of a kind of standard question, which is, talk a little bit about the germ for the book, the ideas and so on, but then maybe talk a little bit about, if you have conceived this project about, okay, secrets in an Irish Catholic family, in a relatively contemporary setting, right? Then the sort of the next big decision, I would imagine, or at least one of the next big decisions, is just how to tell that story, right? And so we were very engaged with your strategy of, you have a family, but then you have this sort of turn-taking, of perspectives, and we used a little bit of a metaphor of a snowball. As we go and return, it keeps getting bigger and that sort of thing. So maybe if you could address those two things to start us off, we'd be grateful.
Sure. As far as kind of where it came from, it definitely was largely based in my own experience growing up in a big Irish Catholic family. None of the characters or specific events or storylines are based on me or my family, but that is kind of the world I came from. So I felt like I knew it pretty well, and I've always been interested in family. Even before I kind of jumped into writing full time, a lot of my work was with families, children, adolescents, adults, dealing with all sorts of issues and diagnoses. And so when I kind of landed on first with this book was the situation of someone returning home after being gone for a number of years. And that was really what I started with.
Okay.
And then it just sort of, all those questions started to kind of come up about why did she leave? What brought her home? How's that going to impact everybody else? And then I really quickly moved to the characters and started nailing those down. But that one sort of snippet of situation was where it started for me.
Okay.
And then as far as how it sort of evolved, the points of view, honestly, all of those points of view were there in the first draft. I sort of expected someone along the way to say, hey, you probably need to cut back on the points of view. It might be a little confusing, but I loved being able to get all those different perspectives in there. And it was a great way to let the reader in on some of the secrets that other characters didn't know yet. And so that's just how I built it. And even that line of dialogue, the transition from one chapter to the next, right. I didn't really set out to create a neat device that would pull you through. I really think I went with that because it gave me a structure of sorts, a way to try to keep the narrative tight when I'm dealing with so many characters. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's great. That's great to start. So I'll just ask one more and then I'll go to the chat questions. So in terms of the perspectives, you know, the one, like there are members of the family that we don't get, like Shane, right? And then we get Vivian, the one who's outside, and Kale is sort of, he's special, right? We'll keep bracket him. But
right.
So, you know, I would imagine that you were thinking about those decisions, right? Why give Vivian one chapter and nobody else outside the family? Why not give Shane a perspective? Any comments on that?
Yeah, I honestly, I would have loved to give other characters. It would have been great to give Shane a chapter. I really enjoyed Teresa, but I kind of had to draw that line somewhere. And for me, it was really about wanting to make sure that the people who were harboring the secrets, such as Vivian, I know she's outside the family, which also gives her sort of a neat and different perspective than all the other characters. I also wanted a chance, though, to show that other side of Vivian, because I think that she's a character that would be pretty easy to judge harshly, but she has her own story and her reasons for kind of behaving the way she does. And so that's, I guess, really where I had to decide, okay, you know, who gets a chapter and who doesn't, essentially. But those are the things that factored into that. Okay.
All right, good. We'll turn to the questions from the group. There's two questions about Maura, and maybe they can, I'll you know, bundle them.
Okay.
So first is, I'm curious about the decision not to give us a perspective of Maura. And also, I did not find her to be sympathetic, right? And then the other question connected to Maura is, I was most taken, in a book full of secrets come to light, I was most taken aback by Maura's at the expense of her daughter. Did you realize from the beginning how big of a part the idea of shame would be featured in this family drama? And how might that be connected to Maura and your handling of Maura and Sunday?
Okay. Maura is definitely a character where I actually would have liked to get a point of view chapter, and just so we could, you know, there's also a reason why Maura behaves the way she does, and without being able to get in her head because she's already gone, that made it difficult. I had to try to do that through her husband and her children's perspectives. And that's a case where it would have been, I would have liked a chance to kind of get into her head and express that, but simply I just couldn't make it happen because she was already gone. And as far as shame, I just coming from the Irish Catholic background and culture, you know, and my family steeped in it for generations, I can't say I knew going in that thematically I was going to really dig deep into all of this and shame, but I did sort of figure it would play a part, just because it is often so much a part of that culture, especially in previous generations. I think things change over time, but so I did not know exactly what role Maura was going to play in terms of, you know, Sunday leaving, and that kind of came along as I built the story. So yeah, I guess I knew Shane would be part of it, but as far as how big a role it played and how it impacted everyone, that kind of came with time and just building the story and developing the characters and relationships.
Okay, great. Okay, so here's the next one from Pat. Reading the book was like walking a mandala. When I approach the center of the mandala, I find myself back out on the outside of the circle, moving toward the center. And that's what this novel does. It uses a Celtic symbol, a circle, the sacred circle of family, to weave the intricacies of a family. Tracey, could you please comment on the ritual applied to her brilliant structure in the book and how it mirrors the internal rituals of the secrets of the families and the rituals they use to hold them?
Wow. That's such an interesting take. I have not heard that specific take yet, and I love that. As far as the rituals, I hope I answer the question here. Again, I think it sort of ties into the structure I went with, because you were just able to see these relationships, these people that cared so much for each other and had each other's backs, but at the same time still felt the need to keep secrets from each other. So it's almost kind of this contradiction going on that was fun to dive into. And I guess that was what I was kind of going for with my structure, and throughout was just trying to keep a hold of those, you know, these guys care about each other, they love each other so much, but they're just extremely flawed. So at the same time, while you want to shake them and yell at them about why they're making these silly decisions, you can empathize, hopefully, with at least most of them. So I'm not sure if that answers the question. I'm happy to take another, qualifier there if I didn't answer it.
Pat, do you want to say? Nikki, can you?
Yeah, if I missed something, let me know.
Okay.
No, yeah.
No, you did. But
I did. Okay.
And even in your description just now, Tracey, you sort of did that back and forth. That's characteristic of the mandala, right? We kind of go in and we go out, we go in and we go out. But overall, you're holding that structure. And you feel it. I mean, you actually feel it. And everybody else is holding the microcosm of their internal structure within the macrocosm of that bigger structure. It's a brilliant device that you consistently place throughout the entire book. I just marveled at the ability to hold all that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I love hearing your take on it. That's different. That's unique so far. That's great.
Thank you.
Okay, question from Nancy. While I was expected to see Sunday and Cale get together, it was difficult to know he was leaving his wife and child. How did that develop in your writing process?
That's a tough one, and I've definitely had people, including a really close friend, get rather upset with me for that, which I understand. But in the end, it felt true to Cale and his relationship with Sunday and just his situation. At one point, he's thinking about the future and how long this road could be. And I think there's just something about the fact that he also knows how it should be in his mind. And so in my head, it was an extremely tough decision, and I didn't want to be easy on him in any way. But it felt true to that character. But it's a tough one, and I've definitely heard lots of different opinions on that decision that he made.
Okay, good. Now here's one from Melanie. Which character was the easiest for you to write, and which was the most challenging?
Probably I don't know if it was easy, but I had a lot of fun with Jackie as he sort of developed. And I think it was maybe because he was kind of that younger black sheep of the family. And I tried to bring in a little bit of a fun edge to some of his language. So I get he kind of came, once I figured him out, he kind of went fast for me. So I don't know if simple's right, but he was fun and he felt kind of natural. So I had a good time with Jackie. And I would say probably the hardest is Sunday, although I probably related to her more than other characters in many ways. It was, you know, the decisions that she made and the impact she had on everybody, and trying to really get that across and what was going on for her, all that conflict. Yeah, there were things I just had to come at her again and again and again, and have trusted readers take a look and read things ad nauseum and help me, you know, nail that down. So she was, I would say, the most challenging, because so much revolved around the choices that she made, and particularly when she left. So.
Okay, great. So Linda asked, can you talk about the title? The title came at the beginning, middle, or once you got to the very end with Mickey?
That was there from the beginning. And and again, it was kind of a working title. I just went with it. And it was another thing I thought somewhere along the way, someone might say, you know, it's not quite working, or we can do something a little more pertinent to theme or something. But it felt good and I went with it. And, you know, I was open to other ideas, but in the end, everybody felt like it was just a really, really well suited title for this book. So, but it was there from the beginning. I can't say I assumed it was going to stay, but.
So could you talk maybe a little bit about how that title may have guided you and as you were writing? I mean, this is a follow-up question from Linda.
Yeah, I mean, I knew it was going to be I'm sure that's probably why I landed on it early on, which I knew that it was, although there'd be kind of that one main protagonist, I knew that it would very much be a story about the whole family. And so in my mind, that just made sense. And I will say, I'm sure on some level, and one of my favorite books ever I read probably 20 years ago, was Joyce Carol Oates' We Were the Mulvaneys. Loved that book. And so I'm sure that was in there, and it just, you know, it just really fit. And which is another reason why I thought, well, someone's going to tell me we probably need to change this title, but it never happened. So everybody got behind it. So.
And how about the name? Was it, you know, there are lots of Irish names, right? So Susan Williams asks, did you always have the Brennan name in mind?
I did. I landed on that early. I mean, there's so many Irish names. My own maiden name is O'Hare, but there was something that just flowed it's so obviously Irish. There's, you know, and it just kind of was, it just sounded right, I guess, you know, in that title in particular. And so I landed on it early and stayed with it.
Susan's noting it sort of evokes for her the name Brennan's Restaurant. Was that part of your thinking? And, you know, then they're in the, you know, food service business.
Yeah. Yeah, it was also a great name for a pub, and I knew that they were going to have a family pub. I don't think I've been in a Brennan's myself. It's possible. But I'm sure I've gotten pictures, people have posted on Instagram, etc. You know, they've held the book up in front of restaurants and bars.
Right, sure.
Which is great to see.
Yeah. So another, maybe a little bit more of a deeper dive, or you know, about more particulars, right? Both Sunday and Jackie are artists, right? But their art is very much, you can tell me if this is unfair or misrepresentation, but it seems to me their art is very much a kind of direct encounter with their experience, right? That, you know, Sunday stories are about Cale and Denny and so on, and you know, Jackie's painting is about the family and so on, right? When that happens, right, sometimes literary critics like to think about, oh, there's something meta going on here. There's some kind of comment on, you know, this book, right? So anyway, you know, I just opened this up for you. If you want to just comment on that, about how you saw their art relationship to their characterizations maybe, or in relationship to other things you were doing in the book? And then, you know, is it unfair to sort of say, oh, there's a clue in here about your book?
No, I don't think it's unfair. I think, you know, you put this out in the world and people take what they will, and I don't think that's unfair. I landed on that because, especially given their role in the family, if, you know, Denny is such a strong personality and kind of the golden child, and so I think when that happens, often the other children do sort of seek out their own path. And I did want them interested in writing and painting before all of this happened. So I kind of tried to work that in. But then, yes, especially since she left, so much of what they, what she writes about and what Jackie paints about is their family. And I think that's, you know, a way of working through that stuff.
Okay.
So it felt natural to me. It felt like it suited their characters. As far as any kind of larger statement, I can't say that was in my mind.
Yeah.
It just really felt like a Sunday and Jackie thing.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe to go back to some of the technique a little bit, right? When you are doing this, you know, shifting of perspectives,
Mhm.
I think one of the things that also becomes sort of a standout for me anyway is the importance of dialogue, right? So, you know, because the dialogue is another way of giving perspective, right? It's going to be complicated by the way in which, you know, somebody's conversation will be shaped a little bit by, you know, their conversational partner. But it's also a way for an author to give us a character perspective,
Mhm.
you know, without the narration of their internal state, right?
Right.
So like we get a sense of Billy Walsh from his dialogue. We get, you know, also from his actions, right?
Sure.
But also we get a little bit of his perspective, you know, from his dialogue. And so the general question would be to just, you know, comment on that, your thinking about relationships between narration and dialogue. And then I have maybe a follow-up, so.
I guess particularly, or, well, in any book, dialogue so important, but particularly when we're shifting perspective, often, you know, it's hard because I had to kind of think about, here's what's coming up in this chapter. Whose point of view do we want to be in for that? You know,
Yeah.
What's going to have the greatest impact and kind of create the most tension? And as the reader, you know, whose head you want to be in when you're watching whatever these events are unfold. But the dialogue was often the way, if we're in Danny's head and such a thing happens, but three other characters are there, dialogue in other chapters was one way to get some idea of other people's response, you know, to the same situation. And I know at times that was one of the things that my editor spoke with me about, is there were times where it was a bit repetitive because we'd be in someone's head and then I'd want to make sure that we got this guy's reaction in.
Right.
And so I'd be touching on things repetitive at times. So yeah, dialogue was a great way in this book to make sure that we knew what was going on between the characters, even if it's, you know, in a reaction to a situation that might have happened in a different chapter. So yeah, I hope that makes sense and answers your question.
No,
Okay.
no,
Okay.
That's good, helpful, thank you.
Yeah.
I have another question from Pat. In addition to dialogue, the scenes are so rich with symbols embedded in them. The shot of Jameson, the gun, the secret compartment under the floor, and most especially the table in the Brennan house. Did you think about those symbols and how they would be used in scenes?
I definitely thought about them as far as I knew the kitchen table would be a big part of their lives. and Mickey's hiding place. I knew, I will say I thought about all of those. I can't say that I come at anything as like, okay, I want to find the most symbolic way of, but all of those things to me made sense. The Jameson is just so, it's such an Irish thing, and it is a symbol. But it felt real for this family that would be kind of their go-to, especially Denny. So yeah, a lot of thought did go into all of those things and wanting to make sure that they fit this crew and, that they rang true.
Yeah, good. Okay, another question from Melanie. One of the most interesting nonfiction texts I read this summer was Say Nothing. Say Nothing is the title. Covered the troubles in Northern Ireland. In your efforts to cover more of Mickey's and Billy's backstories, what kind of existing knowledge did you have, or research? What kind of research did you conduct on the history of the conflict in Northern Ireland to help you with these characters' pasts?
First of all, just to echo, that was a fantastic book. If anyone's ever interested in Northern Ireland and the history and the people that come from there, great book, Say Nothing. And that's where my dad's from. I have he was one of 15. So he had 7 brothers, 7 sisters, and they all had multiple kids. And so he's the only one who left Ireland permanently. And we spent a lot of time there growing up on summers and vacations. So I was definitely familiar with Northern Ireland and always interested in the history. And even going way back, like Leon Uris, and I love anything to do. So yeah, the research was there. Plus, I've spent a lot of time over there and experienced just a little taste of that environment, and so that's where a lot of that came from. And I felt like I was pretty comfortable, and I also could pick my dad's brain when necessary. But yeah, I definitely have some good experience, and just like read anything I can get my hands on when it comes to that stuff. So yeah.
Well, maybe as we're coming to the end, ask you to talk a little bit about the ending. We have this sort of interesting combination of open and closed, I think. The whole Mickey relationship to the gun and Billy's death, they find the body and all that. And Suzanne, in our discussion before you got on, was talking about the whole book as being, there's this big iceberg here, and we're getting some of it excavated, but we don't get the whole thing. So anyway, a specific question is maybe comment about the open close part, and then the other is, are we going to get? We're still the Brennans as another,
that's the title.
for more excavation of the iceberg.
Yeah, I know that the ending feels, I guess, a bit cliffhanger, and it was interesting that when Celadon bought the book, that was something we talked about, and they actually asked me to take a shot at a slightly different ending, not drastically, but a kind of a softer version, I guess, where more things were in question. And I said, well, I'll give it a shot. And I did. But in the end, we all agreed that we kind of preferred the way it is. So it stayed. And I guess, first of all, so many people have asked me, is there going to be a sequel? Yeah. And I will honestly say that has never been part of the plan. When I wrote the book, I've never talked to my agent or the editor at Celadon about it. I'm certainly not opposed to it. I think it's amazing that people would love to spend more time with these guys. I wouldn't mind spending more time with these guys. They're still up there. But I was okay ending it there, even not even really thinking about a sequel, because I guess I felt like the arc of this story for this family had come to an end, in a sense that, they had come through all of their crap and their secrets, and they'd come clean, and they were going to move, whether you support them or not, they were together and they were going to try to deal with this together. So in a sense, I felt like that particular story was told. But yeah, so I'm not sure yet. I think it's amazing that people would like even more. and it's a new enough idea that I'm just kind of sitting with it now. But yeah.
Yeah, and I do think, I mean, there is a strong sense of closure in the idea of, okay, we're not going to bury this, right? We're going to, you know,
Right.
we're not going to do the same thing with secrets that we've been doing. We've learned something in that way, and then, you know, the openness of, well, you know, all right,
Right.
do we have to think about Mickey now as murderer and all that?
Yeah.
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 So Jacqueline makes a comment. A sequel would be great, especially a murder mystery about who killed Billy Walsh. Right? So there, I guess you'd sort of have to, you know, start with the idea, okay, Mickey is the likely suspect, but it wasn't Mickey. But you also, I don't think you could go to the idea that it was, you know, the mob. It was a hit job, right? Because that would sort of take the Brennans out of it, right? So
yeah,
that would be
there's
the
so that's the
challenge.
thing. It's inviting to, again, spend more time, but it definitely would be a challenge. I have to sit down and really think about, you know, what are the next questions and how does it impact everybody? And so it could be fun for sure. And it's really nice if people would, again, just like to read more about these guys. So pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a real credit to you, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, maybe I'll throw it back to Linda.
Okay, yes, thank you so much, Jim. That was we had a great hour. We could go on for 2 hours, Tracey, with your book. What a distinguished first novel. I mean, it's incredible. Everyone at the bookstores read it and they love it. And we're really thrilled to be able to feature you in our book club format, to have that kind of discussion, and thrilled to have someone of Jim's caliber to help guide us, because he's so connected to, you know, to narrative. So thank you
guys so much. This was so fun. I love hearing the different takes on it and questions. It's such a thrill, honestly. And this book was such a passion. So to hear that people are connecting with it this way it's amazing. It's really amazing.
And I do want to thank the audience, because everyone who participated, you know, and had great questions now, as well as were making wonderful comments earlier. So, and I also want everyone to take a final look at the chat box. You're going to find links for the next 4 author programs, as well as another link to purchase We Are the Brennans. If you don't have it, please get it, or get it for your best friend. I'm sure they would really appreciate it. So anyway, again, Tracey, thank you so much for being with us. And hopefully your next book will have you in person. How's that?
Oh, that would be amazing. I would love that.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. And Jim, again, so nice to see you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim.
My pleasure. Yeah.
And Nikki, our streaming engineers, kept us all smooth in our technology here. Just want to thank everyone for spending part of their evening with us, and hope that we see you all next time. So thanks again. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.